What happened was after Mone got into the classroom, he had a gun with him, as everybody knows, and he had the whole battery of ammunition, which he lined up on the teacher's desk. There was enough ammunition to kill every girl in the class. I think there was 11 girls in the class, and he had certainly had more than enough ammunition. He threatened to blow all their heads off, and he was so erratic that he may well have. I think if he shot one pupil, he would have probably continued shooting.
In 1970, Robert Mone and Thomas McCulloch meet in Carstairs Psychiatric Hospital in Lanarkshire, Scotland. Mone has already been there for 3 years, serving an indefinite term, certified severely schizophrenic, after walking into St John's High School in Dundee, where he was a former pupil himself 3 years before, but had been expelled and held a grudge. So, on the 1st of November 1967, he walks into the girls' needlework class with a gun, holding them hostage, including their teacher, Miss Nanette Hanson, who is pregnant at the time, and will go on to sexually assault 2 of the girls. Knowing that the alarm has been raised and that the school is now surrounded by police, he makes a request. He asks that an acquaintance of his, 18-year-old student nurse Marion Young, be brought in to speak to him. They had met a few years previous at the local youth club, but had never been romantically involved in any way. Brave Marion enters the classroom. Mone looks up and says, "Oh, you thought you were being a brave little girl? How do you know I wouldn't blow your head off?" To which she replies, "Och, you wouldn't do that to me, Bobby." She and teacher Nanette will slowly convince Mone to let the girls go. By this time, he's struggling to make eye contact with Nanette. He knows he wants to kill, and she is the target. After the girls have left, Mone tells Nanette to close the blinds. As she walks over to do as she is told, he shoots her at close range in the back. Marion runs to her aid, telling Mone she's still alive, begging him to let her go to hospital and that she's pregnant. As he sits at Nanette's desk, he says calmly, "Do what you want." It's at this point, 90 minutes in, police raid the room. He turns with the gun resting on the teacher's desk and smiles at the oncoming gang of officers. He will fortunately rest his face on many of the black polished boots that have ran in to save the 2 women before being handcuffed and dragged to the station.
What happened was after Mone got into the classroom, he had a gun with him, as everybody knows, and he had the whole battery of ammunition, which he lined up on the teacher's desk. There was enough ammunition to kill every girl in the class. I think there was 11 girls in the class, and he had certainly had more than enough ammunition. He threatened to blow all their heads off, and he was so erratic that he may well have. I think if he shot one pupil, he would have probably continued shooting.
Well, it's a hard job. Taking out, because ever you want to have a smack at them. Cops, you know. Stupid cops want to have a smack at them. I can't blame them. But we took them out down through the corridors, swinging with cops, into the car and down to headquarters. Never said a word. Never said a word. Peaceful, very calm, peaceful. He sat opposite me and drew coffins on a piece of paper.
Marion Young is rewarded the George Medal for bravery. Robert Mone, as we know, is certified severely schizophrenic and transferred to Carstairs Psychiatric Hospital. Thomas McCulloch will join him after being convicted of 2 attempted murders. He's enjoying a meal at the Erskine Bridge Hotel in Renfrewshire when he realises he doesn't have enough butter for his bread roll. Offended, he proceeds to shoot the chef in the face, then the manageress in the shoulder. Both survive. He is certified insane for such an act and taken to Carstairs Psychiatric Hospital, and hence why the two worlds collide. They fast become close. In fact, rumour on the wing was that they were lovers and would flaunt the fact by holding hands and wearing the same silk red dressing gowns everywhere. Robert Mone said of McCulloch, "I was so carried away with Thomas that if he had told me to jump off a tall building and that I wouldn't get injured, I'd have believed him." In 1976, McCulloch and Mone will escape Carstairs Hospital in the most brutal way. For months, they've been making handmade weapons: axes, swords, uniforms, IDs, garrotes, even a ladder. They first need to get keys and decide that they'll be able to get these keys from hospital worker nurse Neil McClellan, who's talking to a patient, Ian Simpson, in a small room off to the side. Also armed with paint stripper, they throw it in both men's faces, hoping it will drop the men to the ground, but it doesn't. Both men start fighting for their lives. But McCulloch, armed with the weapons he's made, bludgeons both men to death, raging that they dared retaliate. He screams at Mone to get the keys. Finally, both men stand back out of breath. Mone hears Ian Simpson still whimpering, so he grabs a nearby pitchfork and embeds it in his chest, while McCulloch cuts both his ears off and scalp, stuffing them into his pockets as trophies. Within minutes, they're over the perimeter wall with their crudely made ladder. They try to flag down a car, but it passes them by. A police car pulls in to help the men. They can see something must be wrong. They're both covered in blood. Police officers John Gillies and George Taylor are instead met by 2 crazed escaped inmates who begin chopping and stabbing at them with axes and knives. By the time the 2 inmates flee in their car, George Taylor will be dead and John Gillies critically injured. McCulloch, high on adrenaline and soaked with blood, will crash the squad car, waving down a van convincing the occupants that they're both prison wardens transporting an inmate. But as William Lennon and Jack McElroy approach the men, they're stabbed, battered and bundled into the back of the van. Both will survive this encounter. Meanwhile, the prison are still unaware they have 2 convicts on the loose. McCulloch, now paranoid, sees lights ahead on the road. Convinced it's a roadblock, he swerves the van into a ditch and both Mone and McCulloch head off on foot. They come across a small family farmhouse and after a short hostage situation, they steal the family car and the family call police. Still heading north, they are soon flanked by police cars that ram them off the road on the A74 just north of Carlisle. Defiant, the pair try to hijack another car that has stopped alongside the police cavalry, but officers eventually get both men on the ground and arrested. 3 of those officers will be honoured with the Queen's Gallantry Medal. Judge Lord Dunpark told 29-year-old Thomas McCulloch on sentencing, "I will recommend that you are not to be released from prison unless and until the authorities are satisfied, if ever, that you have ceased to be a danger to the public at large. I am of the opinion that in your case, life should mean life." This made legal history in Scotland, as it was the first time natural life sentences had been handed down. But the story doesn't end. We've got a bit to go yet. McCulloch spent 22 years in Peterhead Prison, the UK's Alcatraz. Before being moved to Castle Huntly. However, in 2002, the law will change so that people like McCulloch and Mone get a fixed-term punishment under the European Human Rights Act, meaning they can eventually, under the right circumstances, apply for parole. In 2013, after 5 attempts, Thomas McCulloch was released and has been living with his girlfriend Susan, who he started dating 2 years before. Shortly after the sentencing, believe this or not, Robert Mone Sr., who goes by the name Sonny, yes, Robert Mone's father, wanted to be as infamous as his son. So, in 1979, just after Mone and McCulloch are convicted, Sonny, on a drunken rampage in a ground floor flat on Kinghorn Road, killed his dad's half-sister, Agnes Robertson Woe, aged 78, as well as her 2 associates, Jane Simpson, aged 70, and Catherine Miller, aged 29, by strangulation before being bound and mutilated. After 3.5 years in Craig Inch's prison, Sonny Mone was stabbed to death by another prisoner. The prisoner said at the time, he was probably the most obnoxious man in the country. But back to Robert Mone Jr. He had 6 months added to his sentence in 1995 for pouring boiling water over another inmate. In 2011, the system tried to integrate him back into the community, but stopped abruptly when staff became concerned with his behaviour. Now 74, he likes to be referred to as Jim Smith, is still in Carstairs, the prison, not the hospital.